Hi, I'm John Coppola. Let's turn one oak bolt into 3. To make this Nessa set, we'll be using the one-way corn system. Okay, let's get started with our oak blank. It's just rough cut with a chainsaw and then bandsawed round. We're going to slowly bring up the speed until we start to feel some vibration in this tailstock. What you can't see from this angle is I'm actually standing with most of my body out of the line of fire, only my left hand is reaching over to adjust the speed pod on my lathe. Our first cuts are not going to be bevel rubbing cuts, they're going to be push cuts so we can remove all this excess material. So we'll start by truing the outer portion of the bowl before we move on to truing the base up. Alright, let's check our progress and move the tool rest a little closer. As always, give it a little hand spin, make sure we're not going to contact the rest. And back to our heavy push cut. Now we're starting to see that bowl take shape. Right now we're not going to concern ourselves with getting a clean cut, we just want to get rid of all this excess material as fast as possible. Okay, so let's start working on the bottom here. I'm going to use that push cut. Notice as I start the cut, I'm pushing relatively straight in and then using my thumb, my right thumb, to pivot. This just lets us start the bevel rubbing as we push in so we can just even up that uneven surface on the bottom. We're just going to peel everything away and then use our scraping cut just to even out the surface. Now I'm going to grab my calipers, only engaging the left hand side and making sure the right hand side lines up. This ensures I make the tenon the proper size for my chuck. I don't want to make the tenon too large so that my chuck jaws are maxed out. We actually want our chuck jaws to be near the minimum diameter for gripping the tenon for maximum holding power. With my chuck I have 2 sets of jaws, so if after warpage the tenon is too small for the large jaws, I can always switch the jaws to my smaller set. Although most of the time I'm going to be using vacuum fixturing to finish my bowls. Now let's just continue to remove material until we get down to our tenon. Now we're going to spend a little more time getting our shape right. We want a nice smooth curve from the base to the rim. Sorry for the auto-focusing. I'll try to remember to turn that off in later videos. Alright, now we're bringing that curve all the way up to the rim. Okay, now we're going to switch to our 1/2-inch spindle gouge and just clean up that tenon to make a nice crisp 90-degree shoulder. So it's a bevel rubbing cut going down in and as well as across the bottom. Alright, looks like we don't have any fuzz to clean up on the bottom of the tenon, so we'll leave it right there. And now I'm just going to remove a little of the interior material of the tenon. That's going to help our bowl dry a little more evenly, making the base not as thick. Most of the strength of your tenon is going to come from the diameter and not the depth. Felt a little bump in our curve. It's not super important right now to get this completely smooth where it's going to be a twice turn bowl, but I like to make it as a even curve as possible. That will just help in the drying process and allow us to get a nice consistent wall thickness on the inside. And now we're going to finish off our exterior curve and readjust our tool rest so we can access the top half of the bowl. We still have some unevenness left from the chainsaw, so let's go ahead and use a push cut, the same pivot that we're using on the base of the bowl, and transition it into a scrape so we can round off the corner. Okay, that shape's looking pretty good to me. We got our sharp corner gone, and let's go ahead and take it off the screw chuck and turn it around for our forejaw. Well, it's on there pretty good. Let's give it a little muscle and get it off there. The last portion of it, I use the hand wheel on the back side of the lathe so I can hold it with my support the bowl with my right hand so we don't drop it. Now we'll remove the screw chuck and mount our bowl back up. We want to make sure we get a good amount of pressure on the center of the bowl so the bottom of the bowl is resting on the face of all 4 chuck jaws. If we give that tenon any gappage, we have a chance of leveraging the bowl off of the chuck or splitting our tenon. So now I'm going to switch to my interior tool rest. A straight rest could be used here as well, but I'm going to just put the interior rest on since that will be the next process after we are done coring. So again, we're going to use that push cut with a bit of an arc and pulling the handle from left to right. This will let us take any unevenness that's there and smooth it out really quickly just by coming back, rubbing the nose of the gouge. I'll just adjust the tool rest so we have better access to the center of the bowl, and so that we're not hanging over the tool rest too far. Now we'll use a bevel rubbing cut going from the outside to the inside to finish off the top of our bowl. Okay, now that we have the face of our bowl all trued up, let's go ahead and start with the corner system. I'm going to be using the number 2 knives on this bowl, as it's about 15 inches, and the number 2 knife will give us the best cores. We'll get a core with the number 1 knife and a core with the number 2 knife. Okay, so now what I'm checking for is that where my number 2 knife is going to rest on our bowl. We can see that we're just over 15 inches, meaning we want to be around 1¼ inches. The rule of 10% for larger bowls is not necessarily completely accurate. You can go a little less and get away with it. So here I'll go for about 1¼ . Okay, so we'll lock down our tool rests and grab our number 1 knives. Notice how the bolt that's holding the corn rig to the bedways is about centered on our tool post, and that's what we want to see. If we're too far to the right or left, we're going to find that our cores are a lot harder to get out. The tool has a greater chance of binding in the cut, and it makes our life difficult if that happens. So it's best to stay relatively centered. You can go probably 1/2 inch either way without too much trouble, but if you go more than that, you're going to run into problems. So we're getting a lot of vibration from this cut because our insert is dull. So I just wanted to show you guys how much harder it is trying to use a dull insert versus the fresh insert that we're going to switch to. So we got to clean out the Allen key hole so we can remove the dull insert. The time saved removing the dull insert and getting a nice fresh sharp one is well worth it. What will happen if you try to push a dull insert through the cut is it's going to leave you a rough surface, which is bad for drying, and also it's going to heat up the wood, which is again bad for drying. There's a good chance we're going to get some surface checking if we heat it up too poorly. And also we're going to have more wear and tear on our bodies trying to push a dull cutter through. So this is what a fresh cutter will do for us. You can see it's making nice chips. We're going in relatively fast. All I'm doing is using firm pressure, letting the tool cut, not forcing it. And then I'm going to pull on the tool out so I can nip the outer portion of the kerf, and then I'm going to push in to widen the top inside portion of the kerf. Now that we've got it started, we don't want to protrude over the supporting rest, so we're going to adjust the finger so it goes into our kerf and proceed cutting with the number 1 knife. See, the shavings are relatively big and coming out quite fast. As long as it's taking it with moderate pressure, we're going to just let the tool cut, and when the back of the knife comes to the back of the support rest, we're going to stop and adjust the support rest in. That way we don't have too much of the cutting knife overhanging the support where we could get a jam and possibly dislodge our bowl. And here we're going to go all the way and let the interior core pop out and have it smack the tripod for the camera. And I'll crawl under the lathe and retrieve our innermost core. With these smaller inner cores, this one probably being about, I'd say 10 inches in diameter, it's okay to leave them without hollowing out the insides. As long as we seal them up good with anchor seal on the end grain, they'll dry properly without any checking. And I sprayed both surfaces of the core and the remaining bowl, just so that any heat that we generated and moisture loss that we had from the coring is replaced quickly. And then I'll mark the center with a pencil. So when I go to finish turn these, I can use that center point in conjunction with a vacuum chuck to true up the inside before flipping it over, using vacuum to hold it and finishing our outside. Okay. Now we'll put the number 2 knife in, tighten up the support, and let's get our second core out of our mother bowl. I'm putting downward pressure on the cutting knife just to help reduce any vibration. This knife already cut 1 blank yesterday, so it's not as sharp as the freshly sharpened one on the first interior bowl, but it's doing a fine job for me, and I'll okay. So now we'll pull the cutter out, widen the kerf, and now push the cutter in, widening the interior portion of the kerf. I'll go just a little more until we get to the point where the knife support ramps up. That's when we know we're extending over the support too far, and we want to adjust our support. Okay, we'll put our support into the kerf and continue coring. I'm going to core until the back of our cutting knife reaches the back of the support finger. Okay, I could feel the lathe slowing down a little, meaning that we're getting some sawdust clogging our cut, so I cleared that by pulling the knife out. We'll clear the sawdust again and move our support finger in. We want to check and make sure that we're not jamming our support finger into the kerf. So the bowl's spinning freely and we can continue cutting our core out. You can see the chips are getting smaller and becoming more sawdust-like as we cut into the end grain of our core. This will sometimes create a bit of a slurry that will build up on the outside of our cutting knife that we need to clear. As long as it falls off on its own, we can continue with our cut. Sometimes we'll see the slurry build up on the outside of our knife, and you'll see me later on removing that with my hand when we pull the cutter out of the cut. As our knife comes to be 90 degrees to our bedways, we know we're getting close to the bottom of the bowl. So I'm going to bring it right up to about 90. We'll give it a check and see if we can pop our core loose. No, it's held on there pretty good, so let's move our support finger in. I can see I tried to move the bowl with my hand and it was stuck, so I had to wiggle our support finger around to free it up. The cut's getting a little bumpy because we're going into end grain, but we're almost finished here. And here we get a nice clean break on the bottom of our core. Sometimes in figured wood we don't get quite as clean of a break, but as long as you cut close enough to the bottom, it shouldn't produce any problems. So we'll just spray down our core, making sure to replace any water that it lost while we're taking it out. Now on the mother bowl, we won't worry about spraying that down now because we're going to cut and clean up the interior. We want to make sure we come back and clean up the interior just so that we have an even wall thickness from rim to the base, or that we slightly taper to a thinner bottom than rim. This will help us avoid checking during the drying process. You'll find a lot of bowls, if you rough them out and leave the bottom too thick, you're going to get checks up in your rim. That's because as the wood dries, it wants to pull the side grain down and the end grain up. As that happens, if the base of the bowl is thicker than the rim, it will pull the end grain apart. So now we'll go ahead and check our wall thickness with some calipers. Even though you can't see it off camera, I'm looking at the near end of the calipers, which showed me we actually had a fairly consistent wall thickness. We got lucky matching our exterior curve to the interior curve that we cut with the corn system. Now we could leave it with the wall thickness being even like it was, but I prefer to have mine taper thinner down towards the bottom, increasing my chances of drying without any checks at the rim. So here we just want to remove that excess material. we have a freshly sharpened gouge, so we have a fairly clean cut, but if it's a little rough, it's not going to hurt us too much. We don't want to leave an extremely rough surface, as that can affect our drying. A rough cut surface will dry quicker than a cleanly cut surface and can lead to unevenness with the drying. You can see as the cuts get a little thicker, I come back up on the rim and continue down. As we move to the bottom of the bowl in the center, the wood's moving a lot slower, so we have to take more passes to remove the same amount of material. There, my tool rest loosened up a little, so I went ahead and snugged it back up. Okay, we're close to where we want to be now. We're going to find that it's still a little thicker in the base than what I want to finish with. I want to taper down from that 1 1/4 inch at the rim down to maybe 1 inch or 7/8 at the bottom. So we're going to use our traditionally ground bowl gouge now to finish cleaning up the bottom. It deals with that end grain that you're cutting into a little better with its very steep grind. With this style of bottom gouge, we can't remove a ton of material at a time, so we're going to take it in a few passes. Keep in mind, I lifted off the tool rest as I came across the bottom. I didn't come off the tool rest with the tool in contact with the wood. That would have created a catch that would have spun us around until we came back to the tool rest and gave us a pretty bad gouge. Now we're going to go ahead and coat the end grain of our blanks with some anchor seal. I want to make sure I give a nice liberal coating on the end grain. This will promote even drying, since the end grain would normally dry much faster than our side grain. So we're just going to do the outside end grain of all 3 of our bowls. Alright, so now that we got them coated with anchor seal, they're ready to take into our drying room. I'll give you a quick sneak peek here of how I like to set up my bowls to dry. I don't like to set the smaller bowls on the inside of the bigger bowl, as that would stop some of the air movement on the inside. So we'll grab a couple of drying stickers, or just little sticks that we put on the top of the rim of our bowls, so the bowl on top of it is not resting inside of it. I grabbed 6 stickers because when I put it in the drying room, we're going to have one set underneath of our mother bowl, so it's not sitting on the concrete. If we let it sit on the concrete, it'd likely spalt, which, if that's what you're going for, would be good, but that's not what I'm looking for. Now we're going to put on a date so that we know when it's ready to take out of the drying room, and so that it can finish drying in the normal humidity of our shop. One last touch of anchor seal on the top of the end grain at the rim will just help ensure that that doesn't dry out too fast either. Okay, so you've made it this far in our video. Let me give you a quick tour of my drying room. Here you can see all the bowls I've done in the last month, as well as some square spindle stock and our air humidifier, keeping the room at about 65 to 68% humidity. And here we'll finish off showing you some of my once turned bowls. These bowls were turned to about 3/8 of an inch thick and left to dry, and will just be sanded and finished. They will not be recut. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'd also appreciate a thumbs up, and if you would hit that subscribe button. Have a good day.